As part of the railway's increasing research into decarbonisation and green energy solutions, the issue of electrification and battery technology is very much at the forefront of everyone's minds. Overhead line may not be the default solution everywhere, especially on the more lightly used or less trunk routes. So batteries, battery hybrid, and discontinuous electrification are therefore technologies also being considered. Green Signals have already had the chance to look at Hitachi's battery hybrid AT300 series train and GWR's fully electric ex-Viva Rail Class 230. But at South Western Railway, and in particular for the West of England line, where the venerable Class 159 diesel multiple units are nearing end of life, a different and no less creative solution is being considered. Green Signals had the chance to visit Salisbury Traincare Depot recently, home to the Class 159 fleet, and I spoke with Neil Drury, Engineering and Infrastructure Director of South Western Railway, to hear what is planned. Well, I'm here with Neil Drury, Engineering and Infrastructure Director of South Western Railway. Welcome to Green Signals, Neil.
Thanks, Richard.
Last time we had a conversation, we were stood at Ryde Station, at Ryde Pier Station actually, and we chatted about the works that were going on there. So I suppose a good starting point for this is, how's that going? How's the work on the Isle of Wight going?
Yeah, so when we talked last time, we were about to shut the railway for a month, and we reopened it this week. So really successful 4 or 5 week period over a month, which saw all of the works that we described undertaken within time, and we reopened really successfully, apart from the pier, of course, which remains shut. And again, that's the work that we undertook on part of the pier went really well. I'm really confident we're going to finish the rest of that work by May. So yeah, really successful period of time.
That's terrific. And was the weather been reasonably kind to you? Because I remember that you and colleagues from Network Rail were just very cautious that if the weather's bad on the pier, that's a challenge. But so far, so good.
Well, we had a couple of weekends of pretty torrential rain and a few storms, which is kind of representative of where we went. But as I mentioned before, all the planning that we did to avoid the issues or work around them really came through, which is why we're confident we're going to reopen in May.
Oh, that's brilliant. So that leads us nicely on talking about weather and the challenges of that, because one of the routes that you operate, obviously, Waterloo to Exeter, the West of England line, and it is a challenge. Operationally, it's a challenge. You've got quite a lot of single track sections. You've got real challenges with things like landslips and so on. How's that going? Because I know there was, I think it's Honiton, is it, where actually this has actually been more than once now there's been an issue. So where are the challenges on the infrastructure at the moment on that particular route?
Yeah, so Honiton was a landslide, quite a protracted one. Still has water coming down the bank. The work that Network Rail undertook in that location put a permanent wall up to help mitigate any further landslip, but they also did quite a lot of work on the embankment itself to avoid the landslip from occurring in the first place, along with some remote condition monitoring to make sure we understood when things were moving, which is kind of where things are going now, which is more about monitoring what you would normally think as fixed infrastructure that now we're finding with climate change is actually starting to move and cause problems. We've also got flooding very recently at Honiton, so we are seeing more and more issues down that route, but it's not unique. So it is a challenge. It's remote, but it does happen on other parts of the network as well. We are working with Network Rail really closely, and Network Rail have got a plan to continue to invest in the infrastructure to try and mitigate some of those risks.
One of the things I noticed there recently was vegetation. There was a kind of quite well-known shot, I think, actually, of looking at the tunnel near Salisbury, actually looking down, and a shot of it sort of 10, 15 years ago, where there's basically no vegetation, it's all nice and clear, and then now where there's a lot of vegetation encroachment with trees and bushes and so on. Is that a real problem in terms of operations?
So it comes with various pros and cons. So I mean, obviously vegetation shore up embankments with roots. On the flip side, certainly on west of England, there's something called soil moisture deficit, which is where the clay embankments dry up and start shrinking and cause an infrastructure imbalance or movement, which has caused us headaches in previous years. And some of that is also down to big thirsty trees that suck the water out of the embankment. So it's kind of a balance between the two. I think it's fair to say that vegetation is needing to be worked on, and again, Network Rail have got a plan to address that on a risk-based approach, because obviously the current season at the moment, coming into autumn, leaf fall, the perennial issue of leaves on line and wrong types of leaves and all the other good stuff that gets bounded around is obviously linked to trees and vegetation. So managing that is right on the top of the radar at the moment.
So on the west of England line then, last time we chatted, and the reason why I was really keen to have another conversation was about your thoughts around the future for that route. There's real challenges with decarbonisation. You know, we're stood here at Salisbury Traincare Depot. We've got 158s and 159s. They've done a great job, but they're getting on a bit now. So thinking about replacement, and you're taking the opportunity to think about replacement in a completely different way, aren't you? I mean, what's your kind of overall vision, I suppose, for west of England from an infrastructure point of view?
Yeah, that's right. We've got a real opportunity in terms of timing in order to do something completely different to, I think, the rest of the industry. What I would say to start off with, and it will be reneging me not to, is Salisbury Depot, where we stood at the moment, have grown up with this fleet of trains. They continue to maintain them to a really good standard and continue to get, I know there's going to be lots of gasps for listeners, golden spanners on a regular basis for this fleet, but they do a cracking job, and I'm really privileged to have a team that continue to maintain them. And actually, regardless of what the plan looks like, that we'll go on to in a second, we'll have to continue to maintain these for a good number of years yet to come. So yeah, what's the plan and the thinking? So yeah, these things are coming towards end of life, 35 years old. We've got a situation in Southwestern where our fleet size, when Arterios are finally rolled out over the course of the next 12-18 months, that our fleet was sized and scoped for a pre-COVID, pre-pandemic level of customer demand. And also peak demand as well. So running through over the next few years, we will end up with a surplus of electric trains as we continue to go through. Now, of course, you've got the option to drop those out of the fleet and cascade them elsewhere. But what it does do is it provides a really interesting opportunity to retrofit batteries onto existing electric rolling stock, which opens up opportunities for west of England. So for a relatively limited amount of third rail down west of England, so between Basingstoke, Salisbury and Exeter, we could run battery trains down the west of England route and replace the diesel trains, which is great from a decarbonisation point of view. And to that end, we've been working really closely with Network Rail over the last couple of years to undertake feasibility studies, modelling, costing exercises to get us there. And it's all looking really positive. But the time's now, because once we lose the electric stock over the next couple of years, if we do need to downsize, then that opportunity will be lost, and we'll be into having to buy new trains or do something completely different.
So you said the two things you said there, which immediately triggered thoughts in my mind. First of all was third rail, okay, and then the second there's the question about the actual technology itself. So let's just start with the third rail point. I had thought. But I'm hopeful you're about to tell me no, this isn't the case. The ORR and safety authorities have said we really don't want any more third rail. It's not nice. It's got risks. We can move away from that. But you've mentioned third rail there. So what's the plan?
Yep, that's a great question. And absolutely, historically, any addition to third rail was seen as an absolute no. You wouldn't go there. Over recent years, RSSB have undertaken cross-industry research, including the ORR being involved, which has looked at how can you safely extend third rail, not put new third rail networks down because you've still got a risk there, but in terms of the pragmatic approach of just for the sake of running X amount of miles on top, you could get so much more benefit. How could you do that safely? So there's a safe third rail approach, which is more along the lines of it's switched off until you need it, until there's a training section, in which case it livens up and then it turns itself off again when you don't need it, rather than it being fully live as it is all the time at the moment. But that research project has been undertaken and endorsed, and we aim to capitalise on that and roll it out.
So that's been endorsed with the sort of engagement with RSSB. So, that's really exciting. I like. We'll talk a bit about technology next, but that idea of it's only live when you need it and when you don't, it's not, is clearly a sort of a smart thing. How much of it could we be talking about then between Basingstoke and Exeter in total?
Yeah, a relatively small amount in the grand length of it.
Yeah.
I guess what's important to say for the listeners that aren't necessarily familiar with our network, from Basingstoke into Waterloo is fully electrified with third rail, and these things run on diesel power all the way through and hum away in Waterloo Station, which is a fully electric station other than that. So really important that we do get rid in the future for carbon reduction and also emissions. So from a length of railway, yeah. So Basingstoke to Waterloo, roughly about a third to a half, and then you've got the rest of it off network. We're looking at with the modelling that we've done, around 80 kilometres of third rail in about 15 islands of third rail in and around stations, and that in and around stations is really an important piece, which is not only is it the point in time you need the maximum traction power when you're pulling away from stations, but it's also where you're likely to pick up an electrical connection to the grid or local supply, but also when you've got disruption, you can leave a train in station and have it continue to be powered, rather than it being on the batteries and being at risk of running out of battery in the middle of a non-electrified area as well. So roughly 80 kilometres over 15 islands of third rail.
Okay, so the other day I recently had the opportunity to go and have a look at GWR, Great Western Railways, sort of test project they've got running between West Ealing and Greenford. Very impressed with that. It's really interesting what they're doing there. I know we're all friends in the industry, so we can sort of talk about what's good for the whole railway. Is what you're describing for or thinking about for West of England similar to that, or are there differences? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, so from a rolling stock point of view, very similar. I mean, you've got batteries on train, right? It's traction batteries. They need a charge, and where you pick that charge up is the difference between what we're looking at, and I guess what other areas of the industry are looking at with overhead supply and various others. Yeah, I mean, we were working with Viva Rail back in the past on the potential to have batteries on Island Line, for example. So we've got XD stock and Viva Rail stock on the Island Line over on the Isle of Wight, and the concept just wasn't ready in time for us to roll out. So we stayed with third rail. But that idea of having a bank of batteries on line side that's being trickle charged, that can very rapidly discharge back into the train to charge the train batteries up, is absolutely brilliant idea, and would work really well in really remote areas where you don't have a robust electrical network to supply. So potentially for West of England, it may well be a solution for some of the more remote stations that we have that may well not have a suitable connection, but I can certainly see the application elsewhere as well. But that's a difference. We're looking more at having traditional third rail, because that's the kind of rolling stock that we'll have elsewhere. May as well pick it up from the same thing if we can, and have that as a consistent thing down the route.
So that leads us nicely onto thinking about rolling stock. So is it feasible to even contemplate retrofitting the current EMUs that you've got on the system, or you're bringing into service, or are we looking at are there going to be some real challenges with that, or have they been future-proofed? Has the back change been sort of designed in?
No, it hasn't. Certainly not on the older trains. Really on our fleet, we're looking at the Zeros or the Aventras as the two potential options if we were to retrofit batteries. And obviously you've got a generational change between those two types of rolling stock. What I would say is that as part of the work we've been doing with Network Rail, it's been a bit of an interesting challenge getting a four-way non-disclosure agreement signed between commercial entities. So we've been working with not just Network Rail, but also the train owners and the manufacturers of those trains, sharing information and technical detail in order to try and get to the point that we understand whether or not it is feasible and what it would take in order to get that retro modification undertaken. And it's been brilliant that, you know, everyone's come to the table, everyone's worked it through, and it is absolutely feasible to install and get going. Now there are there is a considerable amount of design work that's required, and sunk cost and upfront cost, and therefore we need to have a critical mass of trains rather than do one pilot. But what we will, you know, but that does have other knock-on benefits as well. So where we're talking about West of England in particular, there are, on Third Rail in particular, real benefits of having even a modest traction battery fitted to existing trains, because we get so many occasions where we have trespassers or substations go down, or other issues where we have to just shut the Third Rail off because of all the risk we were talking about with it being live all the time. That we end up with trapped trains on a regular basis. We end up bringing the network to a halt on a regular basis because of that. And for the sake of having the ability to move trains under their own power through those isolated sections, it gives a performance benefit. And then you can start looking at potential safety benefits. So can we create bigger gaps in the Third Rail to have access for track workers rather than them having to cross over Third Rail or travel a considerable distance to safe areas? Can we make the Third Rail network simpler and easier to maintain as a result of being able to have larger gaps? There's a whole suite of benefits that come off the back of it.
I had a very similar conversation with Steve Wight at South Eastern, actually. Sounds like it's all quite joined up, actually. He was saying exactly the same things in terms of perturbation, be able to get back services moving if you've had to switch off for any reason. So it makes perfect sense.
Indeed, and yeah, absolutely. So to answer your original question, so we've been doing some real detailed work with the manufacturers to understand whether or not it is feasible for trains to be retrofitted. And in terms of timing, I kept on coming back to this in discussions that I've had with yourself, is now is a great time, because the De-Zeros, if that was the way that we were to go, have got 10, 15 years of life left in them, and battery life is around 10 or 15 years. So you've got an ability to have a life of batteries on that fleet. Adventures, of course, are brand new and will go for 30 years. So you've got two interventions for battery renewals during that as well. So it just makes sense that you can maximise the investment period for those fleets as well.
And just picking up on your earlier comment about potentially having more Aventras or more EMUs than you need for the future, is it even possible to contemplate being able to retrofit EMUs and not actually having to buy any additional new trains as well?
That's exactly what we're trying to achieve. We do have the ability at the moment to accommodate that with the expected growth that we have, and that'll be a mixture of all of the electric fleets that we've got on lease at the moment that will be involved in that. But the idea is that we could completely avoid having to go out to procure new trains that have got batteries on them, and have this relatively high risk introduction piece, because batteries, whilst they're not new technology for a rolling stock solution, for a train solution and for an operational solution, actually there's not been a wide scale battery rollout yet. We don't quite understand what that looks like. So to be able to have a relatively modest investment in fleet, to understand that, it can inform future procurement as well. So the plan for us in particular would be that we would retrofit existing fleet over the course of the next 10 years or so, 5-10 years, to see these to end of life, well, properly end of life, right to the end of life, but then also replace those, then run for 5-8 years with that solution to inform a big fleet procurement for replacement of De-Zeros and the rest of the mainline stock as well, including the West of England.
Next year, 2025, SWR could be one of the first to become part of the new world of train operations coming back in-house. Is what you have just described about your rolling stock strategy part of a dialogue going on now with the DfT? Because presumably the worst case scenario is that's going to be a complicated process. We know that. You don't want to lose momentum in what you're describing at the moment for the sake of of that process as well. So is that conversation underway?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been working with the department as well, unsurprisingly, the project now is at a stage where the DFT is chairing a quarterly steering group for this very project, for the West of England's decarbonisation project, and we are engaged with the wider DFT team on the same as well, and it does absolutely feed into our plans for the future. We're writing about it in our annual business plans. It's going into all of the thinking that's going on in terms of the future of this operation and this area. So absolutely, it is.
That's good to hear. And I suppose in terms of timescales, what's the next big milestone then? Really, is there a point where you say, yeah, we've got this kind of almost like once in a generational opportunity, but we need to grab it and make a decision about this? Then what's that?
So we can't avoid the pound signs, right? So the next thing is to translate the what everyone is saying and feeding back to us is a very pragmatic and sensible plan into one that makes sense from a financial perspective. So the next one is strategic outline business case, and going through that process just to make sure that it is the right financial solution as well.
I suppose, the most important group of people out of all of this are your customers, really. And I know sometimes from speaking to people, the West of England line particularly sort of felt a little bit like a Cinderella line. This kind of changes that, doesn't it? Or this reinforces that is not the case.
Yeah, and I mentioned right at the beginning of the discussion about the infrastructure issues, which lead inevitably to performance issues. So immediately you start having that feedback and from our customers that is around, you're not investing in the line, you're not. Yeah. So I completely understand, and that's absolutely right. And the other thing, of course, is that we continue to try and invest in this fleet from a refurbishment point of view, and we've tickled at it, if I'm being really honest. We haven't really had a full fleet refurbishment. So again, when our customers are travelling on these trains, again, the same sort of sentiment comes back, which is you're not really grabbing hold of this. And
feels a bit vintage, doesn't it?
Indeed.
Yeah,
so we are absolutely committed, and
yeah.
This is a big step to demonstrating that we are thinking about the future. We want to invest. But also, that's great for future talk. But similarly, this fleet is about to have a big investment as well. Yeah. It needs it, both from an overhaul and a look and feel point of view as well. So again, hopefully that will go some way to demonstrate that we are absolutely investing in continuing.
Yeah, that's a big commitment because they're relatively near end of life. So
but with that plan for the future, so we're sitting here saying that the infrastructure going down and getting batteries retrofitted is going to take a period of time, 5 to 10 years. We need to do something with this fleet for 5 to 10 years because we need something that's going to be able to continue to carry customers in the way in which they would expect and the way that we would want to do so.
Absolutely.
And that's what we need to do.
Very final question, because one bit of the future is happening now, and that's the introduction of Arterio trains. You've just got another service going to Shepperton, which is great. Are we now about to start seeing Arterio, starting, I suppose, the real flood start to come and start seeing those trains in service?
Yep, and the feedback's been absolutely brilliant from everyone that's been involved in, colleagues, customers, everybody. It's absolutely needed. Very quick answer is yes, absolutely. It's on the rollout now. It's on the ramp up. A really exciting time in the programme, and look forward to seeing it through the next year.
Fantastic. Well, likewise, I do think they look terrific. So I'm sure as soon as everybody else can see the benefit of them, the better. Neil, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it, and good luck with the plan. It's innovative and it deserves to be supported. So let's hope you can get it to the next phase with everybody's backing. So
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you.